Hi, this is Roger Moore, and you're listening to James Bond Radio.
Hi, you're listening to James Bond Radio. My name is Jack Lugo. I am here with Dennis Calero, who is the co-author and artist behind the graphic novel adaptation of Casino Royale. How are you, Dennis?
Oh, hello. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for coming on. I'm having you on for a very selfish reason, by the way. I loved
Okay.
your book. I love the adaptation of Fleming. I want to see more of them. So that's
Oh, yes.
so,
We'd
so
love to do more. We'd love to
and
do more.
I want more people to hear about them because, basically, whenever some of these conversations that we have with fans, it's like, well, there isn't enough Bond out there. There's a long gap between the films. There's no
Right.
presence of Bond at Comic-Con or anything like that. What can I do to get Bond in between the times that we're waiting for a film to come out? And I always say to them, check out these new Dynamite comics. They're awesome,
Yeah, yeah.
especially
They're
yours.
all terrific. Oh, well, that's so kind of you. And I feel like me and Van are in our own little special corner of that new James Bond universe where we're trying to, adapt the original tales. And then the others, of course, are doing just wonderful work on original tales, including I believe that the origin of James Bond, at least as far as the comics go, is coming out right now as we speak, and they're going to be terrific.
I'm looking forward to those, yeah.
Yeah, it's an exciting universe of Bond for everyone that just hasn't had enough. We're certainly working hard to get you as much as we can.
I really appreciate it. Now, we always start off with some quickfire questions for our guests, just
Awesome.
basic Bond questions about your fandom. So this way, fans could get to know you a little bit. So,
Sure, yeah, shoot, fire away.
question 001, what is your favorite Bond film?
I've answered this question before. I think I'm going to have to answer it the same way. It's which one I'm watching at the moment. But what I can do is I can narrow it down. I can say this. There is at least one in my top 5 or 6. There's at least one of each of the Bond actors. So in no particular order, my favorite ones are From Russia with Love, Her Majesty's Secret Service, The Spy Who Loved Me, Living Daylights, GoldenEye, and Spectre. And as to which one of those I love the most on any given day, I would say I probably love Spectre on more days than the others, but I love all those films. And at any given time, what's so wonderful about the film series is that it's this rare thing where there's a continuous flavor and tone, but as we all know as fans, there's a variance. And I think what used to be seen as a weakness of the series, that inevitable variance between not only the actors portraying Bond, but the people behind the camera, writing it, directing it, producing it, now is seen as a strength that we can enjoy. If we feel a little bit goofy, we can put on one of the Moores or one of the Brosnans.
That's
If
how
we
I
feel
feel.
like we want tough as nails Bond, we can put on a Connery, or we can put on a Dalton, or we can put on a Craig.
It's very hard to do rankings. When those rankings come out, I never pay attention to them. I mean,
they're always wrong.
They're always
terrible.
Wrong. So
They always put Man with the Golden Gun above Living Daylights, which is it's ludicrous. It's insanity.
Yeah, there was one recently that put Man with the Golden Gun over The Spy Who Loved Me, and I almost had.
Oh my God, that's crazy!
I almost wanted to take that article and just even if it was on my computer and just smash. I wanted to smash my screen basically.
Man with a Golden Gun may be near my bottom, even though I still enjoy it. I like what Christopher Lee did. I like Villachet. I think he's a great. Nick Nack is a great side character. One of my favorites of the henchmen. Or henchwomen, but plot-wise, even as goofy as some of these Bond movie plots can be, that one pushes even that small sense of credulity in the Roger Moore Bond universe.
Oh yeah, definitely. So next question: what is your favorite Bond book?
That I think that has to. Okay, so of the original Flemings, I would say probably From Russia with Love, because it's the best combo of good writing and good action.
That is
and
a good
again,
one.
like Moonraker, a lot of good action. The writing I don't think is quite as on par. Casino, great writing, but not as much action. as You Get In From Russia with Love. So I would put there, and I'll give an honorable mention to my favorite pastiche, which is Trigger Mortis. I forget the writer. I'm sure people can. It's a recent one.
Yeah, it's Anthony Horowitz.
Yeah. Oh, it is Anthony Horowitz. Okay,
yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love that book and the audiobook performance by David Olieweho. I just butchered his name. He's an English actor.
Oh yeah, I know he is.
He happens to be black. He does a great reading of Bond, of the villain, of all the characters. He really fills out the world. So Trigger Mortis is definitely one of my favorites of the new Bond.
You have to read Forever and a Day. Have you gotten to that one yet?
I heard it's terrific. I'm dying to read it.
It is awesome.
I don't think it's released here yet. I don't think.
I got it like a UK import. I ordered it from Amazon UK.
See, I want the audio book, and it's harder to get the imprint. It's hard to get the out of country audiobooks unless you just want to buy CDs, and I don't want to do that. But it'll be here, I think, in October. So something to look forward to.
I mean, actually, that book actually depicts one of the scenes that you depict in your adaptation, which is Bond's 007 kills. Yeah, to become a 007. You know, the Japanese cipher. And also.
They do that, huh?
Yeah, and also the second killing, which gets a little up close and personal. That book actually starts off with that.
I'm curious because I know they're covering that moment in the Bond origin comics. So I wonder if there's any. I would imagine probably not, but I wonder if there was any effort made to sort of have any continuity between the comics and the books, but probably not.
I don't know. I mean, that was one of my questions. I mean, maybe if I have one of the artists or the writers, I can ask them, because I was a big fan of the Charlie Hickson books, or the Young Bond books. Which,
a lot of people were.
Yeah,
those are very well considered.
They were very well written, and By Royal Command is, I think, one of the best Bond books in my opinion.
Really?
Yeah,
I'll check it out.
Yeah, definitely check it out.
Cool.
Question 003. Who is your favorite Bond girl? Now let me explain. You can have two options here. There's tends to be a Bond girl who kind of gets the blood boiling, and then there's another Bond girl who you could select for strength of character. So so we split this one up into two categories.
That's not misogynist at all.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So one just to get the blood boiling, the one you want to marry, and the other one that you don't want to marry. To make light of that. Let me think. Well, the one that gets the blood boiling is on top.
Okay.
I mean, Femke Jansen was just the combination of the actress and that character, and my suicidal tendencies with women. All come together, and she's perfect. As far as a great Bond girl, that's just a great Bond girl. I don't remember her name, but I've always liked the character and the performance of the woman who dies in For Your Eyes Only, the one that sort of starts out trying to fool Bond, but they kind of end up getting along. And then, do you remember the guy with the glasses kills her on the beach?
Yes, that's actually Pierce Brosnan's wife, Cassandra
Yeah,
Harris.
Is it? That's what I thought. The combination of the performance, the strength of that character, and the impact that she has on the story. She dies, and she actually has an impact on Bond, especially on the Moore Bonds that isn't too prevalent in the Moore Bonds in terms of people having sort of an emotional impact on Roger Moore's version of the character.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I always remember her. She always stands out.
Okay. Yeah. She. I mean, actually, the actress died. Pierce Brosnan's first wife died, I think, of cancer.
It's too bad.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I could see that. I could see why you would choose. Why someone would choose her.
Call it a minor. I wanted to call that a minor character.
Yeah. So 004. Who is your favorite Bond actor?
My favorite Bond villain?
Actor. Bond actor.
Actor. Oh, that's easy. Timothy Dalton.
Okay.
But far and away, I feel like it's a shame he didn't get to do more and perhaps at some point better films. But I think in terms of which actor came the most prepared to be the version of Bond, this is obviously personal preference. I feel like Dalton came to the part to be the version of the character that I most wanted to see in cinema.
He's very Fleming. Yeah.
Especially at the time, coming off of Roger Moore. Now, I've grown to appreciate what Sir Roger did with the character as a chapter in that evolution of Bond. But when I was growing up, it quickly lost its charm. As I went from sort of a child enjoying his antics in Moonraker or whatever,
right.
And then sort of getting a flavor of something better and For Your Eyes Only, and then remembering how Octopussy and I'm fading fast. Of course,
A View to a Kill.
View to a Kill, of course, were very disappointing in terms of what I wanted to see in a movie about a master spy. And then Living Daylights, and I can see Living Daylights not the greatest Bond story, not the greatest Bond movie, but even that just the
pre-titles,
the initial section, not the pre-titles, but even the initial section in Berlin.
Okay, yeah, when you shoot,
right
when you
out
shoot
of the
the
short
butt of the
story,
gun,
yeah, right out of the short story. It's that I was like, that's how the last 5 years that I've been reading these books. That's how I see the character. That is the portrayal that I've wanted to see. That being said, I love them all for the different things they did. Of course, you got to love Connery. You got to love what Craig is doing is amazing. You got to love when Brosnan's stuff was top notch. I think GoldenEye is one of the best, and he was great in it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And
we just did a Timothy Dalton appreciation on this podcast. The co-host Tom Sears and Chris Wright, they both did. They reviewed the two films recently. Then we did a whole Pierce Brosnan appreciation, all the best scenes and everything.
It was really
fun.
Great.
Yeah,
GoldenEye is great. Tomorrow Never Dies is okay. I actually like World Is Not Enough a bit more than Tomorrow Never Dies. I actually have come to appreciate that one a lot as a solid Bond adventure. But even Lazenby brought something to the character, and I think that if he had elected to continue with the series, arguably I think we could have seen him grow as an actor.
I agree.
And do some interesting things with the character.
We say that all the time on this podcast. We love George Lazenby. Next year is actually the 50th anniversary of that movie.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so yeah, it's just a movie that we love. That's probably my second favorite Bond film. On Her Majesty's.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. So, question 005: what is your earliest memory of Bond?
I think my earliest memory of Bond has to be seeing the poster for Moonraker after getting out of, the upteenth time of seeing Star Wars. And I always tell people that it clearly was a way to try to get kids into the theater to say, even the pose, even though it's a Bond pose, the specific pose with the ray gun was even somewhat reminiscent of the Luke Skywalker pose on one of the Star Wars posters. And it worked. It fooled me. I thought I was going to see a Star Wars type picture, and then clearly it was not. But it worked. I fell in love with the character instantly. And then to get a little bit older and read the Fleming books and to discover, there's another side of this that's so much richer and so much deeper and so much more mature.
Oh yeah,
that
definitely.
I think I found my favorite character that I will ever have. And I think it's
as an entryway to the character and to the stories. I think Moonraker is a good film. It's just obviously not a Fleming-esque story, but
it's a goofy film with a great villain.
Exactly.
I gotta give that the actor portraying is Draco. Is that correct?
Hugo Drax, actually.
Hugo Drax, right? Hugo Drax. Great villain and really well played by an actor who clearly knew the movie he was in, but didn't play it for laughs, didn't play it for a goof. Like he's like, I'm going to be the villain that would exist in this world, and he was terrific.
Okay, so what is? Do you have a Bond location that you'd like to visit, or have you visited any Bond locations?
Let me think. There's so many of them. So many of them are dangerous. I have been fortunate enough to travel a lot. I haven't traveled to Asia as much as I've traveled to Europe and other areas that I'd like to travel to. I think in terms of just Bond nostalgia, I wouldn't mind going to. I think it was Vienna in Living Daylights with that the amusement park in Vienna, which I understand is actually not very nice, but Vienna is beautiful. So I'd love to see that park.
Yeah, the Ferris wheel's still there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'd like to see that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. So question 007, what is your favorite scene in the series? And I know that's probably a very difficult thing to pin down.
Favorite scene. I gotta divvy it up again because it's just too complex a question.
Yeah, no, you're allowed to elaborate and answer it however you like. You don't have to just.
So favorite opening. I'm not dividing. I'm not gonna divide it up among pre-title and post-title openings. I just say that my favorite opening is probably the Living Daylights in Germany opening. It's probably the one that I can watch that over and over and over again on a loop. Favorite action scene. God, there's so many.
Yeah, it's very hard.
It's got to be the ski jump. It's got to be the Spy Who Loved Me ski jump with the Union Jack parachute because that stunt is insane.
That's an iconic moment. Yeah.
The ski actually tears. I'm sure you know this, and your viewers know this. The ski actually one of the skis partially tears into the parachute. So there were so many places where that guy just could have died.
Oh yeah.
It's just a great stunt. Real stunt. I love at the end of Her Majesty's Secret Service when Bond is holding Tracy and says, "We have all the time in the world." That's a great scene.
Yep.
I think, and the torture scene from Casino Royale, I think is exceptionally well done.
That one, I mean, Casino, the film, they did an exceptional job, and they were very bold to actually keep certain things from the book. So I'd have to agree with you there. And then the final quickfire question is, what's the most Bondian thing you've ever done?
Probably order a Vesper for a woman at a hotel bar in Paris. Nice. That's pretty Bondian. Yeah, okay. That's pretty good. I was wearing a suit, so it was
nice. Well, thank you for answering the quickfire questions.
My pleasure. Great question.
So let's get into talking about your book. How psyched were you to take on this project?
I can literally say it was my dream project. It's my dream project. It's the thing that I'm not someone that's super into. Like I've worked on Batman, I've worked on Spider-Man, I've worked with these different characters, the X-Men, and I've enjoyed it, and I've taken the legacy of those characters seriously, and I've gotten a kick out of working on those characters. But there are very few characters that I would say, I wouldn't feel my career was complete if I didn't do something with that character. I was even very much into the legacy of the Bond comics. I'm a big Horak fan. Yeah. Who drew a lot of the James Bond comics, and I think this is from the 60s to the 80s in that time period. I love that guy's work. I love those strips. So even Bond, but even the subset of the Bond comics, I was very into that legacy and that history.
Yeah, Bond does have a history. Like even some hardcore fans don't know that Bond was a comic strip before Dr. No. Yeah.
Yeah, it had run, I think, close to 10 years.
Yeah, John McCluskey, I think, was the original artist.
John McCluskey, and there's even speculation that the reason Fleming sort of gave in to Connery, who was not necessarily hot for when it first came up, was because Connery did kind of look like the McCluskey drawing of Bond. I mean, it's an undeniable resemblance.
Oh, yeah.
Whether or not that actually had any effect on Fleming's decision-making process, I don't know. That could be apocryphal, but definitely there was a resemblance there. So every sort of permutation of Bond's history, if I didn't get a chance to draw this character and then to draw the novel in the most explicitly, accurate, explicitly, specific to the novel version that's ever been. I'm just incredibly proud, and Van did just an amazing, job on the
So
script.
how did you get approached for this? Like, did the Ian Fleming Productions approach Dynamite, and did Dynamite, ask you to do it, or how does one?
It was a little roundabout. It's not a secret. It was a little roundabout because there was another. I think back when, this is a number of years before Dynamite acquired the license. I was approached by someone working with Ian Fleming Publications, who was very keen to bring these graphic novels to the American market, possibly to the world market. Again, something that had never been done before, a page-to-page, adaptation in the truest sense of the word of all the novels. That, as will often happen in all facets of entertainment, whether you're talking about publishing or movies or television or whatever, that didn't go anywhere. Just wasn't the right time. Then Dynamite acquired the license. They began the project with Van. There was another artist, and for whatever reason I'm not going to get into because it's not my place to say, that this didn't work out. And eventually someone, I work with Dynamite a lot. They're great guys. And someone on the Ian Fleming side said, well, what about this Dennis Calero guy that we sort of looked at a couple of years ago? And they're like, well, yeah, we know Dennis, so sure, why not? Let's do it. And then it was all about playing catch up and trying to minimize, because the project was delayed so many times. So it was trying to minimize, it was interesting. Bond has a very rabid fan base, and so I do remember that there were people on Twitter when it was announced that I was drawing it, and I was sort of in the middle of the process. Yeah. There were people on Twitter like, "Hey, it's been like 3 years. What's taking you so long?" And I'm like, "Buddy, I've been drawing this for 3 months. It's been 3 months that I've been on this project. So don't yell at me. Yell at somebody else, but not me, because I've only, I'm going as fast as humanly possible while retaining some level of, quality." So, that's basically how it goes. It's the standard answer is always like, oh, yeah, they approached me and I liked it, whatever, but I prefer to just be a little bit more transparent about that kind of stuff, because especially I'm very sensitive to the fact that there are probably people listening who want to get into entertainment, into comics specifically, or entertainment in general. And, a lot of these projects, they kind of work like this. You kind of start out with something, you talk to someone else, it looks like it's going to go, then for whatever reason it just doesn't, and then sometimes years later, out of the blue, it just picks up again. Remember that thing we almost did? Yeah. Guess what? We got funding now, and we want you to do it. And that's actually happened a number of times in my career. So that's why I try not to get too frustrated when things, sort of configurations of deals fall apart, because I sort of go, well, it'll come together when it's the right time and the right configuration. Because why would I want to work on this when someone's going to lose money on it, or someone hasn't figured out a way to make it work for them financially? That's not what I want. I want to work on projects where everybody wins, where everybody is able to profit if the work is good. But again, the original question I want to emphasize, my dream character, number one by far. There's literally no one else I ever have to work on as a character to feel like I've accomplished, that sort of personal goal.
Well, that's great to hear, because I'm not an artist, but the thing that would, if I was in your position, the thing that would be daunting to me would be deciding what the literary Bond should look like. I would probably be racking my brains out, just trying to figure out how the character should look on the page. So what was that process like?
Well, they had a general idea of what they wanted the Bond to look like, and I tell you the truth, I basically took Timothy Dalton, Michael Fassbender, and who I really like and who I think would be a great next Bond.
I noticed a bit of Fassbender as I was reading it. Yeah,
there's a bit of everybody. Yeah. No, you're not going to find for example, you're not going to find a picture of Fassbender and be able to overlay it and go, well, that's it. Yeah. Because I always was very careful to because it's not Fassbender. I wanted to bring in elements of Dalton. I brought in elements of clearly the description, the scar and the comma of hair, right. But also trying to adhere to, the general decision making that was made before me about what the character should look like. So it's all kind of smashed together, and I sort of did, Vesper had a whiff of Elizabeth Taylor. Even though,
I
again,
noticed
there's
that
no,
too. I mean, I
there's
really
that.
love that when he first sees her and like he's glancing at her like a little bit. There's a panel where he's like, they just met, and he's like taking small glances at her. You captured that so perfectly in your
Well,
book.
I thank you. That's completely due to the people at that's Johnny from Ian Fleming Publications, who basically walked me through breaking that page down. Because Johnny had a very specific vision about how that page would work. The idea that Bond didn't see Vesper as a person yet. He saw Vesper as a collection of initial impressions: her shoes, her pearls, her lips, her breasts, her ears, her eyes, but not really coalescing into a person. Which is why, and by the way, a comic artist, you could drive yourself crazy and go down a rabbit hole with this kind of sort of theoretical approach. But I did try to employ. There was a point towards the end of the graphic novel where Johnny was like, he's like, Johnny was the guy that was helping us on the Ian Fleming side, and he was like, I don't want to be one of those guys, but like I feel like Vesper is not completely on model towards the end, and I was like, that's kind of on purpose. It's not like totally off model. Off model meaning like you chose for your listeners who don't know the vernacular, basically meaning like when you start a project like this or an animation project, you try to like have one artist or one person do a version of the character, and then you try to make that match as much as possible for consistency's sake. And I made the argument, I'm like, I'll change it if you want, but I go, I'm actually trying to make her feel less glamorous, more like a real person, because Bond now sees her as a person. I'm hoping that it'll be subtle enough that people won't call out and go, oh, that looks totally different. But that maybe something subconscious will happen where the reader, along with Bond, will stop seeing Vesper so much as this glamorous, idyllic, or idolic, representation of a woman, but sees her as a person. Sees the flaws. Sees that her nose is a little bumpy, that her features are a little asymmetrical. Not that I want to overdo it, because I don't want to draw attention to it, and maybe it doesn't even work. Maybe no one ever notices it, but it's the kind of thing that you want to try to play with the reader's expectations and observations on a psychological sort of subtextual level. I think some people have made it work. I don't know if I made it work, but I feel like I've read books where it has worked.
I think you did. I mean, anyone who hasn't checked it out, it definitely has to. But I mean, reading it, I did kind of notice, like, especially like towards the end, where she's kind of lying and pretending that but she's also paranoid at the same time because she knows that the guy's following her. I mean, I think Bond kind of the way Bond falls for her. I guess yes, you could kind of trace the way his thinking about her kind of evolves throughout the book. At first he doesn't want to even work with a woman, and then and then he kind of accepts her. He sees her as a beautiful woman, as a beautiful kind of specimen, and then he eventually falls in love. Yes. So
that last part was very difficult. I've actually never had an experience drawing a book where I was sort of getting emotionally involved, because what's coming at the end if you've read the book, and obviously if you're working on the book, you know what's coming at the end, or you should.
Right.
And I'm drawing Vesper, and Bond's impression, because Bond is a 1950s. To me, Bond is I think of Bond as progressive as a white English man is going to be in 1955,
which is not very much. Yeah.
Which is not very much, but within his own, I always think to myself, and I don't feel I really don't feel I'm bringing that to the text. I feel like I'm reading it in the text. I'm reading the work of a middle-aged English man who, for him, is stretching out and is more progressive than the people around him. Is that enough? Is that do we judge him by modern? We're not going to get into that in this forum. But so Vesper is acting in a way that, once you know what's going on, feels very self-consistent and makes perfect sense. Bond's reaction is, "What's wrong with this crazy bitch? Like, what's can I curse a little bit on your podcast?"
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, Bond's like, "What's wrong with this crazy bitch?" and then you find out, oh, that's what's wrong. Like, she's going through a moral and spiritual breakdown, and your heart breaks, and Bond finds out too late, and I kind of feel the movie aside, Casino Royale, the movie aside, I feel like in a modern context, the idea of I'm a woman and I'm having a moral and spiritual crisis, and I'm in love, and my solution is suicide. You know, I don't think that would play these days. I don't think that it would. I don't think that would feel true at least in a Western context in our modern day, life. But in 1955, in that culture, it absolutely is authentic.
Yeah,
it is
I absolutely believe that's what a character like Vesper would do in that situation back then. But obviously, if you're talking about today, I mean, I think if someone was if Fleming were writing today, obviously things would be very different. But
he'd be a different guy. He'd probably write it differently. But I think that there is something to reading these novels in the context of when they were written.
Exactly.
Will that always be true? Maybe not. Maybe in 100 years we'll have finally gotten so far from the moral, again, that word, moral context of the time, that no one will be able to read it and sort of put it in that context. And if that happens, that happens. But for now, I feel like we can still reach and see. The other thing about that, not to go too far down this tangent, but the other thing about that is I've always argued, I've gotten to these discussions on social media with really interesting people with interesting points of view, and I'm always like, you got to remember, I don't feel Bond was ever meant to be an aspirational character.
Oh, I've had this conversation too. You almost took the words right out of my mouth. He's not meant to be an aspirational character.
Not at all. And in fact, even Fleming wouldn't even go in the original Spy Who Loved Me novel. He's even going so far in a way as to proselytizing. I'm messing up that word. He's preaching. I use a simpler version of the word. Because my mouth doesn't work. He's preaching that no, this is not a character for you to emulate. This is a broken, compromised. It's a broken, compromised character, and he has admirable traits. He's heroic. He's self-sacrificing. He will sacrifice himself for the greater good every time. He has admirable qualities, but he's not a hero or an aspirational character in the traditional sense.
Yeah, I think in some of his letters, he used the phrase that he didn't want Bond to be a cardboard hero, which I think is the best way to kind of encapsulate that. I don't think he's an anti-hero precisely.
No. He's not an anti-hero. Yeah. He's just a flawed. He's a flawed hero. He's a hero with flaws.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the way the Bond brand has become, it's almost as if the way because it's become so iconic, people are under the impression that he is an aspirational character, and I have gotten into that that same kind of discussion.
I think you're right. I think that when you look at the Craig films, though, I think one of the really nice things that they've done is they've gotten away from that tendency of wanting Bond to be this perfect, idyllic hero, because he definitely is not in the Craig films. I think people have really responded to it. I think Brosnan was an overcorrection in terms of just talking about the films. Yeah. I think Brosnan became an overcorrection for, Dalton's great. And I think, you can certainly argue that a lot of what Dalton was bringing to the character is not all that different than what Craig did. It's just that I think for the average moviegoer at the time, Bond had almost become like a family adventure film series. And so to have the character suddenly become this much relatively darker character, I think was just whiplash-inducing for a large segment of the audience that had lived for Roger Moore for, how many years? 1973 to 1986? Is that right? 13 years, something like that.
Yeah. He started in
it's a long
73
time.
to 85. It was
85. Okay, so 12 years, a long time to have sort of a very specific idea of this character. But then I think Brosnan was an overcorrection, and I think there was enough time between Brosnan's last film and Casino was so well made. Casino, made by the same team, essentially, that made GoldenEye.
Yeah,
same director. I believe. Am I wrong? Were they the same screenwriters? Was it Purvis and Wade?
Purvis and Wade didn't come along for GoldenEye. They actually started with The World Is Not Enough.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So we have the same director, totally different, but enough time had gone between what was the last Brosnan one? That was
Die Another Day.
Of course. Oh God.
Yeah.
I wish I could forget instantly.
Yeah, I wish we can forget Die Another Day.
That may be my least favorite, but I still enjoy parts of it. Die Another Day. Enough time went by that I think the Procolis could say, no, this is what we're doing. This is what Bond is. Take it or leave it. And people, I think, were just ready after Bourne Identity, after those kinds of films. I think they were ready for a Bond that was much closer to Fleming interpretation.
Yeah, no, I'm happy that they went in that direction. I think almost everyone is. So let's talk a little bit about the kind of work that went into creating the atmosphere of your particularly the casino scenes of your book. What the challenges of recreating those scenes for your book. What were they, and can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Of course. I'm proud of some of the work I've done in the backgrounds and things like that. I mean, in terms of the suits, the clothing, the thing that I came to, I was talking to Van about it and Johnny at Ian Fleming. The thing I realized, like, we walk around today and we see buildings, we don't see buildings that were built in 2018. We see buildings that were built from, say, newer buildings are between 2010 and 2015. But we're walking around, we're seeing buildings built in the 90s, built in the 80s, built in the 50s. There are buildings built in the 40s that are still around. Not to mention that in Europe, you're probably walking around and seeing buildings that were built in the 1600s, 1700s, 19th century, 20th century. And so it's really not just about, if you're going for a certain level of authenticity, it's not just about drawing, mid-century modern interiors and buildings built in the 1950s. You're looking at a man in the 1950s, but he's walking among a social structure, both socially, but also physically, that was built in generally speaking, in that area of the 19th century. But to do that and not make it confusing, is also difficult. So Bond is always sort of the most modern element. And like Bond will be wearing, suits that are of the moment. I was looking at European male clothing catalogs, fashion catalogs from 1954, 1955. But then everyone else, I would sort of say, well, Vesper obviously is she's Audrey Hepburn, she's Elizabeth Taylor, she's a woman of the moment. But everyone else is different. M is not going to wear a suit cut to 1950s. He's going to have more of a 1930s style, so the lapels are going to be a little bit different. Again, no one else might notice these things, although I do think that the slight variance is something that people do pick up on, subconsciously. So it was generally speaking, a lot of research. What kind of car? In terms of Bond's car is very specific. Le Chiffre's car is very specific. Everyone else, I could play with. I could say, well, this is a gambler. He's probably well-to-do. What's an obscenely expensive car? What's the version of the Maserati in 1955? What would that be? What would it look like? How many lights would it have? What color would it be? That kind of thing. And it was fun. It was a lot of work, but it was fun.
It was great to see Bond in his Bentley.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Those kind of details. Bond fans, we all love that. So yeah, no, you did a great job with that. So how did?
And again, another shout out to Ian Fleming, because they were the ones that were like, oh, remember, his fog light is here and it's not on. It's on now, but it's not on in this panel. Don't forget to turn it off. So they were there just catching every conceivable possible detail.
And that's what I appreciate about your book, is when you're reading the novel, some of those details, they just kind of fly by, because, you're, especially if you're reading it, at a quick pace, which for these kinds of books you do, you tend to kind of overlook some of these details. And then there are panels with that car chase, especially, like you just mentioned, there's a section where where the lights are not on, and then there's a section where the lights are on. And then, and when I read Casino Royale for the first time, I found it hard to kind of envision how the accident happened. He crashes the car,
right?
They put the spikes down on the road before the car arrives and stuff. But a lot of these details, you kind of like when you're reading the novel, like you don't really fully picture sometimes, because
sure.
So that's what I definitely appreciate about your book.
I mean, I think a lot of novels do that. I mean, I think a lot of stories do that. Like even in comics, it's like the rule is like if you don't have to show it, or even I think in film as a director, I think I've discovered that too. It's like you don't got to show everything. What you want to do is you don't want the reader to feel confused. You don't want the reader to stop and go, wait a minute, I don't understand that. Let me read it again, because that interrupts the flow of the dream that you're trying to create. But there are a lot of novels and books where like really good movies that people love, and you stop and you go, wait a minute, if Indy didn't show up, they would have opened the ark for Hitler, and then everyone would have died. But you don't think about it in the moment. And if you don't think about it in the moment, it doesn't count. Like, I'm not interested in criticism of stories where it's like, well, I sat and I combed through your story line by line and found all of these inconsistencies. I'm like, because that doesn't count as a criticism. That's not helpful, because that's not the manner in which the story is supposed to be absorbed. So what's the point of that? At the end of the day, it's all fake. It's all lines on a page, or it's all actors on the screen. So if you're going to tell me that your criticism is that it's not real, well, surprise, it's fiction. It's not real. It didn't happen. None of this stuff happened. But I definitely feel there were some stuff. It's Fleming's, I believe it's Fleming's first ever novel, period, if I'm not incorrect.
Yeah, no, that's his first novel, yes.
And I think that there's definitely parts of it that are not as visually constructed in a consistent manner, if that makes sense, as much as they would be later. Even in Russia with Love, like there are sequences, action sequences where like everything is blocked out, makes perfect sense, nothing is confusing. So I will say there was a couple of parts of Casino Royale where we had to go, well, we're not quite sure what it means that
I think
Lucifer's eyes always have whites too. Around the but like for example, Lucifer's eyes, we had a conversation, always has whites around them to make him look like a doll. I'm like that's a really cool like written metaphor. In terms of visual, that doesn't really make sense. Like he can't never not blink. Also, but actually more specific to that point, if his eyes are always so wide open that it's always white around his eyes, I can't give him any expressions. He can't squint. He can't, his eyes can't go wide in a moment of, punctuated peak or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So we had to take some liberties, although that, interestingly enough, that one was where they're like, no, just make it work. You got to draw it that way and and I think it works. I think it works. But I'm just saying as an example of one of those things where it's like, well, it sounds cool on the written page. That's not going to work necessarily in a drawing or in a visual medium.
Or even in a film. Yeah. I mean, I think Casino Royale was was a story that they thought was unfilmable, earlier on, just because, there's so much
playing.
So
much cards and talking.
Right. And explaining the card games and explaining Chimère and Fair, which is not a game that a lot of Americans especially are going to be familiar with. I mean, was that a challenge for you too, capturing those gambling scenes?
I think that the way Van staged it was really superlative, and I can't say enough about Van. He's just so goddamn good at what he does. And not only that, but there was space. Not only his script was a wonderful combination of very prepared and specific, but also there was space for me every once in a while. I'm not saying a lot, but every once in a while for me to go, I think there's a way to do this visually that's better. And there was space for that, and there was openness to that. And I got to say again, Fleming Publishing, they were never against a good idea. They were like, it has to be accurate. We want this to be the definitive version of Casino Royale. Within that context, is that word again? I overuse it, but within that context, or rather, within those parameters, that's a better word. Within those parameters, any way that you decide, you're the comic book guys. So any way that you decide that visually you're accomplishing the goal in the most efficient and interesting way possible, we will support that. And we did a lot of wacky stuff in this book visually to get that across. So it was fun.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. I mean, your approach to the torture scene, I think, was really well done as well. I went back actually to the John McCluskey comic to see how they did the torture scene for that. It's just interesting to see how, what the kind of artistic choices are for scenes like that. But yeah, no, I've enjoyed, obviously I want you guys to do more. So
yes, please. All your listeners should tweet at and email Dynamite and be like, we want these guys to do Live and Let Die. A script exists.
It does. So, okay. Because that was going to be one of my next questions is, are there plans to do Live and Let Die next? And do you think that book would be problematic given some of its outdated?
Yes, very much so. But Van, I think Van has really done good work in order to, look, it's a problematic book. Of all the books, that's probably the one that's the most problematic.
Yeah.
The N-word flies left and right. That's not in the script. For the graphic novel, we sort of looked at the movie and sort of realized, like, wow, like they really tried to make the henchmen and the characters to be fun, individual, not stereotypes. Although you could argue some of them are stereotypical, but from my point of view,
in the
they feel like individuals.
They tend to be because of the way they speak. And in the film, they don't speak that way.
No.
Yeah.
And again, Fleming is a white guy in the mid-50s writing about black people in America, in a country he does not live in. And, I read that from reading it. I'm not black, so I don't have the right to define what that means. But reading it from my own individual point of view, I'm like, for an English white guy in the 50s, he seems to like black people. And there's the stuff about, like, well, of course, black people are intelligent and hardworking, so of course there would be a supervillain eventually that was black. That was just as capable and intelligent as any other, European villain Bond would face. And I'm like, for this guy, that's probably
that's a progressive viewpoint sorta, for back then. Yes,
sort of, kind of, but yes, there are changes. Now, whether or not I get to draw it, I want to draw it. My understanding is there's a thought about whether there should be a different artist for every book. I can see that. Obviously, I make no secret about I want to be the guy that draws it. But if they want someone different to draw it every time, I understand that. I would say if someone was asking me my opinion, and I think you are, I would say the specific challenges of adapting this work and working with Fleming, we went through a lot of growing pains. And so one of the things we said toward the end of the project was like, man, like if we get to do this again, it's going to be a lot easier because now we got a flow, we got a rhythm, we have a workflow that we all understand. I feel like at the time I felt like Fleming Publications, they understood what our challenges were, and we as a team, me and Van, understood what their challenges were. In addition to Joe at Dynamite, all of us sort of coming to understand what each of us wanted out of the project and what each of us needed to do our best work. And I just don't think a new guy is going to be able to, get with it that quick. So they should just hire me and be smart.
I totally agree. Dynamite, Ian Fleming Publications, if you're listening, bring back Dennis. We want him back for Live and Let Die and for the rest of the Fleming books.
I would love to do it. I would love to do it.
So I was also going to ask you about, the way Bond is in Casino Royale, like some of his, some of those dialogues, especially the one with Mathis at the end of Casino Royale, it's a bit surprising, even for Bond and even for Fleming back then, that he would have these kind of philosophical discussions where he's questioning the role of villains and heroes, and he has that whole section where he talks about the Red Indians and which is what the chief brings up. So do you think Bond either was like a little naive, or do you think perhaps there is like, even for the Fleming books, do you think maybe Casino Royale is like the formative book that kind of makes Bond who he is, and at the end of that he kind of resolves those questions that he was from those pieces of dialogue that we see?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that Fleming was looking at this idea of I don't want a character that just goes after the quote unquote bad guys because they're quote unquote bad guys. I think he liked the idea of, that guy from Russia or the guy from behind the Iron Curtain. He's just doing a job, same as me. Whether he dies or I die, at the end of the day, we're just serving a purpose. There was a great line in Casino Royale. I forget if it's in the graphic novel, but I think it is, where Bond talks about how the modern English version of democracy 50 years ago would have been considered socialism.
Yeah. And
we would have railed against it. So what are we actually fighting for? That the other guy's just a guy doing his job. It's only when Smersh specifically brings about the destruction of the love of his life that he's like, well, I'm not in it for king and country, or queen and country rather. I'm not in it to make a philosophical point. I'm in it to get the bastards that killed my woman. And it's about making it personal. I think that was very much. I can imagine that there was a conversation that Ian Fleming had with someone, the publisher, or someone he was close to while he's writing this book, and saying this can't just be about fulfilling a mission and doing one's duty, because that's dry. It's been done, and we're not living in that world anymore. We're living in a new world, and I want to make this character, his conflicts, to be more personal, and this is how we're going to do it. And so for the first long arc of those books is Smersh, just taking it to Smersh and making them suffer for what they've done to him personally and to the people he loves. And then of course it becomes about Blofeld, which is just another version of sort of resetting. Tracy becomes a reset of Vesper.
Yeah,
so I think that was very much on purpose.
Yeah, and I think obviously he created, Spectre was kind of created to get away from, the evil Russian
Smersh.
Smersh, yeah. So, I always find whenever because I tend to, Casino Royale is a novel that I kind of go back to every now and then and reread, and I always find that section of the book very interesting. So let me ask you this: if you were in charge of Bond right now, they gave you the reins. What would you like Bond 25 to be?
Wow. I would have loved to see Danny Boyle do it, because Danny Boyle is one of my favorite filmmakers, and I think that he's a guy, he's made an amazing science fiction movie. He's made an amazing horror movie. He's made an amazing, if anyone hasn't seen, I think it's called Millions, his children's movie.
I haven't seen it.
It is a wonderful, tear-jerking family movie. It's like, he just understands, he seems to be just understands story. And so whatever genre he ends up working in, he doesn't want to deconstruct it. He just wants to tell the best version of that genre that he can. And I really appreciate it. I think he would have made a great, Bond director. I understand that, the Bercolis have consistently their own direction, and they don't necessarily want an auteur to come in and sort of, tell them what to do.
I was disappointed too. I wanted to see the Danny Boyle Bond 25, but
I would love to read that script and see what would have happened, because I'll be controversial here. Casino Royale was one of the best Bonds. I think that every Bond since then has been a downtick. I think that Quantum of Solace is good as a coda. Like when I saw it, I was very disappointed. But then when I see it right after watching Casino, I'm like, okay, this is an interesting coda to Casino.
Yeah, it's grown on me too. I think
it's a 2-hour after credit sequence. But it's a 2-hour, like, we're just going to watch a little bit of what happens to Bond after, and in that context, it's a lot of fun. Skyfall, I thought, was very overwrought. The villain won. Like, the villain got everything the villain wanted. Bond did not gain anything. And so I feel like Skyfall was very hand-wringing and, overly emotional in a way that didn't feel dramatically satisfying. Spectre was a slight uptick from that. And I actually got to see Spectre a couple of weeks early because I was in London with my wife, and we got for some meetings, and I got to watch Spectre when it opened in London at a really nice theater after having several Vespers. So it was a great experience. So to answer your question, if I was put in charge of Bond film production, the first mandate I would establish is we got to put these out every 2 or 3 years. It can't be every 5. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
The fans are
Marvel's putting out Marvel's putting out 2 movies a year. Yes, with different characters, but we can do a movie every 2 years, every 3 years. People talk about Idris Elba. And Idris Elba would have made an amazing Bond 10 years ago. For me personally, here's my theory: beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
In 2017, 2018, Bond, being half Scottish, half Swiss from the UK, he can't be black because in a modern, I keep using this word, in a modern context, that is totally authentic. You can do that.
I totally agree there too. I mean, I know it's a controversial subject.
The problem is he's almost 50. The problem is Idris is almost 50, and with this track record, if he got started in 2 years when he was almost 50, 49 or whatever, he'd basically be like 50, 53, 56. Like he'd be at Roger Moore level within 3 years.
One of the speculative things when they were mentioning Idris becoming Bond, which I kind of maybe could get into, is maybe they do Idris as Bond, but for like 2 films, and then they move on. Just like they did, just like a Timothy.
But Dalton. I don't want that. I don't want 2 films. I would love. I mean, the reality of time and age means that I don't like it, but I want them to cast a Bond that's 35, do one every 3 years, so we can get a string of 5 to 6 solid films with one actor. And I think that the Craig era has shown them, as far even though I think there have been ups and downs, I think the Craig era has shown that a Bond that has a consistent story that carries over from film to film, that the audience is into that. And so to start the next actor and to do a soft reboot and then have 5 or 6 films that are part of that are good individual episodes, but are also part of a consistent and continuous story, I would love to see that. I would love to see a 5 or 6 film movie series that does that.
Okay, so who would you do you have anyone in mind for Bond 26? Assuming obviously we get Bond 25 as Daniel's last hurrah.
Right. Oh man, I don't know. No one is super. Michael Fassbender.
Okay.
I know. I recognize that it's time for a black Bond. And there are a couple of English black actors that I think could easily do well. I mean, if anything, I'd say pick an unknown. The English theater is full of actors that are superlative and would do an amazing job. And just go find someone unknown and give them a shot. If you were pitting me down to someone who was currently working, I would say Fassbender, to me, might have the most interesting interpretation because he seems both emotive as an actor. He seems both emotive and cold in a way that in a specific combination that feels very Bondian to me, that I would love to see him try. But the real answer is there is no, see, the problem is there is no best person for the job, because there's a lot of wonderful actors that would each do something different with the character that objectively you can't quantify. You can't say that's better than that. Fassbender would be better than, some other guy. Yeah. It would just be different. So I would say pick a wonderful actor that's going to do something that feels within the Bond legacy, but also illuminate something new about Bond that we didn't have before. And maybe a black actor can do that right now in this moment in time better than anybody else.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be waiting a little bit longer than expected for Bond 25.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Which, I'm okay with. I want them to make a solid film. So, of
course.
So I'd rather them take their time and craft a really good final movie for Daniel Craig.
Is there a director? Let me ask you a question. Is there a director, a modern working director right now that you would like to see take over for Bond 25?
I think maybe either Edgar Wright or Matthew Vaughn. I like both of their films, and I wouldn't mind seeing Martin Campbell come back for a final run too.
Wouldn't that be great?
That would be.
Martin Campbell would be fantastic.
That would be fantastic, and assuming that maybe they go back to the Purvis and Wade script that was around before John Hodge and Danny Boyle came around, I think
interesting.
Martin Campbell would be perfect to come on board and just sort of put things back together and
shepherd the series out.
Yeah. Because I do want to see a really solid, final film for Daniel Craig.
Of course.
So,
I would say I think actually that's a better answer than the one that I was going to give. That's a great answer, probably the best answer. I was going to say I wouldn't mind seeing Christopher McQuarrie take a shot at Bond, because I think he's someone that could say, I did Jack Reacher, I did Mission Impossible, and I can pivot and I can recognize what makes a franchise unique.
Yeah.
And I can come to Bond and do what Bond, I can do something with Bond that is respectful of Bond's legacy, but also put my spin on that legacy as well. I would love to see what he would particularly do.
I'd be curious. I guess my only concern is I'm pretty sure Tom Cruise has probably got him locked up.
For sure. This is Fantasyland we're talking about. Like Christopher McQuarrie is booked to the end of the century.
Yeah, but I would love to see what he'd do. It's one of those things where it's like, if they brought him on board, I wouldn't mind. But it's one. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So, can I ask you what other projects are you working on? Is there anything coming out soon or that has just been released that people can check out?
Yes, please. Thank you. Dark Horse just released a trade paperback collection of my series of stories in Dark Horse Presents called The Suit, which is somewhat Bondian. If Bond was written by David Lynch, or rather he was written by, written by Oliver Stone and directed by David Lynch, that you might get an idea of what this crazy book is about.
That sounds pretty wild.
Out. It's pretty great, and it's pretty crazy, and people have been responding to it, which is very gratifying. I'm working on a book for humanoids right now that should be out later this year, as well as a private project for a science fiction thing. And I'm also writing and directing a documentary, which the subject I can't talk about now because we don't want to blow the secret.
Okay.
And it'll be fun. And I have been pitching a particular horror channel on some fun stuff, and I'm hoping that will work out as well. So I'm busy and happy, but would love to get to Live and Let Die whenever that got going.
Yeah, I want to see Live and Let Die. I mean, my favorite Fleming book is From Russia with Love, and I know that it would be a while before you guys would get to it. But,
sure.
I want people to start buying these books, and maybe the success of it can keep going forward, and we can get to From Russia with Love.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's hard to get a sense of how. I think I get a sense that these books are moving. Whenever I do a signing, we seem to sell out, which is not the usual. But again, people buy them and they tell Dynamite that they want the series to go on, whether they want me to go along with the series. It would be wonderful to see them come out and eventually, fill out the entirety of Fleming's catalog.
I would love to see that. I'm sure a lot of other Bond fans would love to see that too. So where can people find you on social media? Do you have a Twitter handle? You want to give out your Twitter handle?
Yep. At Dennis Calero, DennisCalero from Twitter. You can also follow my webcomic with the wonderful Todd Stashwick at www.todd, T-O-D-D, Stashwick, STASHWICK.com. And we do a little supernatural horror comic called Devil Inside, which is completely free.
Oh, cool.
We don't even take your email address. We just want people to, if they like it, to tell their friends about it, and that's the entire, price of entry.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Well, thank you for joining us, Dennis. And I really hope you guys, you get to do Live and Let Die, and the series continues with you as the artist. And I look forward to seeing more from you.
Your lips to God's ears. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dennis. Thank you to Dennis Calero for joining me for that discussion. I really had a fun time chatting with him. It's sort of interesting to find out about the kind of input that he received from Ian Fleming Publications, and where he was able to take some liberties and where he was not. They were obviously, very interested in making this the real deal, a real true to Fleming adaptation, graphic novel adaptation of Casino Royale. And they did an amazing job. I can't say enough great things about this book. I mean, if you haven't picked it up already, you definitely should. Dennis's artwork is exquisite, and Van Jansen, his co-author, did an amazing job incorporating the text and making this sort of a new way to sort of experience the Casino Royale story. I think if you have not picked up this novel, this book, definitely pick it up. I really hope that they do Live and Let Die. It sounds like Van Jansen, Dennis's co-author, has a script in place. So let's hope that they do this, and let's hope that they bring back Dennis Calero as the artist. It sounds like they have a really great working relationship. I really want them to do all the Fleming stories. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Live and Let Die. And I know Dennis, during the interview, sort of mentioned a few different ways that they were thinking about approaching it. I really hope we do get to see it. As a quick note, there is not going to be a new episode of JBR next week. Tom and Chris are taking a week off, but they will return with their review of GoldenEye, which I'm sure everyone in JBR land is going to be really excited about. So we all know, Tom especially is a huge fan of that film. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say about it. This has been Jack Lugo for JBR this week. You can find me on Twitter at JackLugo1 is my Twitter handle. I also help run the JBR website, so jamesbondradio.com. You can go on there, look at our articles, also leave a voicemail. We'd all love to hear from you or see your comments on the articles and stuff. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and JBR will return with a review of GoldenEye. Bye.